So to formally introduce myself, my name is Christina Nemec, and I founded Simply Worded about 4 or 5 years ago. My goal in doing so was to help people in the corporate environments, businesses, entrepreneurs work with language so that they're more effective in the way they communicate and get the word out to each other more effectively. And I think connect is the word I really want to use. Other than being the founder of Simply Worded, I also am a full-time English professor at Sierra College, and I've been teaching there for about 10 years. Just recently was awarded a full-time position, which is so exciting. It's my dream job. I just love it. So now I'm balancing a full-time teaching job with working Simply Worded. And in the past, I worked at UC Irvine for about 10 years as an English professor there and have an MFA in creative writing. So I've got that piece as kind of a icing on the cake, so to speak, with the creativity. And so, we're all here, I'm guessing, because we love language. We understand its power to inform others and to persuade. Certainly, if we have kids that want the car keys, they know the power of persuasion as well, and inspiring each other to be better people, be better at our jobs. And like I said just a little while ago, language for me is all about being connected. And this big word's been floating around for a while now. It's this concept of authenticity that for me felt so intriguing when I first heard it. Oh yeah, let's be authentic. And then I started thinking about it, and I said, well, what is authenticity? What does it look like? And I mean, we kind of know it when we see it, but we don't always know how to get there. So, but before I move on, what do you guys think authenticity looks like? Or if you were trying to like bottle it or describe it in some way, what might you guys say about that concept? Jody, what do you think? Like if you were to define it for yourself?
I'm trying to think of a word that doesn't, or a sentence that doesn't involve using authentic.
Uh-huh.
I guess just being honest and truthful.
Yeah. And so honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dave, when you hear that term, what rings a bell for you?
Oh, he might be on mute.
Oh, is he on mute? Well, Kevin, I'll ask you.
Well, I think that it's being true to yourself, even at the risk of maybe not being accepted by others too.
And that's a great concept, right? It's like standing on the edge, and I think that this leads up to a story that I was thinking about using to lead the conversation. And a recent, I was doing a workshop in Nevada City, and this beautiful lady walked up to me, and she's so cute and sweet and bubbly and warm and really wonderful. And she said, it's so interesting because when I text or when I email, I use these really short, abrupt sentences, and it's not me. And I just don't know I don't know how people are responding to me and why they, like, what do I do? And I said, well, the first thing that popped in my head was, well, it's because you're not being true to yourself. And we talked about it a little bit. And the idea, I think, was, well, that's not what business language looks like. We're supposed to be clear, concise, and direct. And yet the real person behind those messages wasn't like that at all. And so we talked a little bit about, well, where's the balance between that classic and romantic conversation style that you got? And when Kevin, what you said makes a lot of sense. You had to step out of that preordained business speak. And I think she felt sort of relieved, and I gave her permission, or we gave each other permission, or whatever it was, that we can be a little bit more natural. And I think that might actually help our businesses grow and our relationships grow, particularly when we're so far apart from each other right now, and light that up a little bit. So, that's what this is what this is a little bit about. It's about avoiding communication breakdowns and building up those stronger connections. So when we talk about communication breakdowns, what are some of the costs that come when a communication starts to unravel? Does anybody have any thoughts? Like what do we lose?
That's to doing business, I think.
So explain that.
If people don't understand what you've got to offer, or what you don't understand what they have to offer, you lose that chance of making a connection to actually do business with each other.
Well, right. And so there's a bottom line right there. You know, you might lose clients, you might lose people coming through your door. And within a working environment too, there are other things that we do risk. There was a report that in 2018 on the Economist Intelligence Unit talked to people, and they sort of listened to what people were attributing to failed communication. So 44% said that, you know, they saw delays or failures to complete projects because people didn't know what was expected of them. That happens a lot to me right now on Canvas. I'm really learning how to get ideas across the Canvas as an academic platform I use, about getting my students really clear on what the homework is and showing them where the information is and how much, and they're going, oh my gosh, I didn't see this project. So it's really training people to hear and to see through a platform. You know, there's low morale when we're not communicating really clearly. 31% reported that. Missed performance goals and lost sales because of this lack of communication. So, you know, it feels like a soft skill, and it is what we call a soft skill, but there are really some very strong and very powerful, you know, monetary costs, and I think also emotional costs when we don't communicate super clearly and effectively, or with emotional intelligence, as we were saying earlier. So what I developed based on what I know about talking to people, and so many of you I can already see are experts in this field as well. So what will be really fun as we move forward is throw in your 2 cents worth. This program is really designed to help people who are in a work environment where maybe there's a little bit of a communication breakdown, people that might need a little bit of help with grammar, but it's so much more than that. You know, grammar and in terms of its application and its impact on others. And so I developed this program called Get Real, you know, kind of thinking about authenticity, and each one of the letters stands for a particular skill, which we'll be getting into in just a moment, which is role. And, you know, we have so many different roles that we play. And when I was first starting this program, I went, gee, well, there's got to be the perfect role to play, right? There's got to be some sort of perfect default. And what I realized after thinking about it for a long time is that there's not. And we'll talk a little bit about how to determine who you are or who shows up in any given kind of a consultation or interaction. We bring a lot of energy to our conversations, whether it's positive or negative. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what energy looks like, if you can kind of break down or actually, you know, like name the parts of what that looks like when we're in a conversation. Talk about audience. That a lot of people put audience first, and I think you got to know who you are before you assess somebody else. And then we'll talk about language finally, and wrap up with just one language trick that you can use in your writing or in your communication that could just immediately apply. And this is just a highlight from a day-long series of lectures and interactive activities that I offer through Simply Worded. So it's just a snapshot of what I do. But this will move forward. There you are. So I'll just kind of throw it out right now. Just a really simple question. What kind of communication skills do you find, maybe even in this context of quarantine, that you guys admire? And I can't see everyone on my screen. I don't know how many folks we've got right now because I've got the screen share going. So I'll just kind of throw it out there, and if anybody'd like to just throw skills out that you think are absolutely relevant and useful to us these days.
Listening is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so and that's Linda. Thank you. And so Linda, expand on that a little bit. What is important to you hear?
Well, I'm in sales, and oftentimes I have to watch myself because I do talk a lot. But I think listening, people really appreciate it when you sincerely listen and make eye contact and like you're really interested in listening to what they say. I think they really appreciate that.
And I'm wondering, I can't see everybody because I think what you just said, Linda, is really powerful. I'm wondering if Trina Gold's in the room, because I don't know if she's arrived yet, but we had a talk earlier about a Simon Sinek video that talked about being present. And that speaking to that idea, Linda, of listening is something that you offer someone, is your full attention. And it is like a bit of a gift, and it really does elevate, I think, any kind of interaction with others. So that's a great comment. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Well, it's communicating with body language, not just with words too, and how eye contact and being present, like you just said.
Yeah, and that's sometimes really hard to do, isn't it? Especially when and you can get over eye contact somebody too. You can kind of stare too deeply and then people look away. And so it's kind of a skill, but it really is. And unlike if you see the folks on the screen here, they're really moving forward and they're mirroring. And so we'll actually do an exercise around that, in a while as well. So, there are a lot of different kinds of communication skills that we've got. Some people are great storytellers. That's a beautiful skill. Some people are really good at using personal experience to, amplify or accentuate. Some people are great factors. They can put a list of facts right in front of you. I don't know why I said factor. That's not even a thing. But somebody who can really list information and really get people information in a quick way. So there are tons of skills. And one thing I think it's really important is for us to identify what we're really skilled in, and then also think, what could be something that I could work on a little bit to round out those abilities in myself. So we'll start with role. One day I was driving my son to school, and he's a good student. Thankfully, he's really a great kid, but he's really complaining about his teacher, and he goes, "Arr." And I hear it, and I immediately started speaking about the teacher's perspective and what she does, and maybe she's got this in mind and goals. And he looked at me and he goes, "Mom, would you please just stop being a teacher and be a mom for a minute?" And it took me back because I thought I was being a mom, but what I was being was I was stepping into a role that I was very comfortable in. And rather than being a listener, being supportive, or just whatever, I started taking on a role that at that moment, unintentionally, wasn't working for me. And so I'd like to talk just a little bit about being aware of who we are when we come in, and seeing what we are defaulting to, where are we comfortable, but what kind of personality kind of comes out in any given kind of interaction. And once again, it's kind of going back to taking a risk. Maybe we need to try on a different role and see how that works for us. So looking at roles, what's the difference between a duty and a role that we play? They're very, very different. And I'm seeing new names pop up on the screen. And if you guys would feel comfortable, I'd love to see your faces. I'd love to see who's behind their names. It would be great to just get a little bit of visual interaction going with you guys. But I might just call on Fred and say, Fred, could you kind of articulate for us maybe what the difference is between a duty and a role?
Okay, I can't get my camera to work is why you don't see my video.
That's
So,
okay.
Yes, a duty is something that you may be assigned to do at work, whereas a role is some persona that you have, and there could be two types. One is, what is your role in the job? Are you a manager? Are you a first line worker? Or are you the company clown?
That's right.
So you could have different roles that are unrelated to your title.
If you're a person that works a front desk, for instance, speaking to that, you might be very much in charge of who gets to go to see what boss. You might be answering the phone. You might be doing various paperwork duties, like a lady or a gentleman at a front desk. And yet you might also be the face of the company in some way. You might be the person that creates an environment where people feel comfortable to come in and welcomed right away. Or you could be somebody that kind of creates this very cold environment where everybody feels on the edge of their seats, very, and very rigid. And, you can create environments by just thinking of yourself in a certain way. And right, so there are two very different kinds of approaches to the way you do your job. And I'm sorry, this little button just doesn't want to click. So I thought we'd start with a bit of a breakout session. I'm not sure how many we've got here. Let's see, I'm kind of missing the number. But I'm going to ask us to get into some groups. And what I'd like for you to do is to take a scenario and think of 3 ways that you might be able to address a problem that I think is relatively common in a workplace environment, really basic. 3 ways that you would address chronic tardiness. We all work with people who, for whatever reason, come in late on a regular basis. Maybe they've got extenuating circumstances at home, or they're just bad with time management. It might be a coworker. It might be someone that is in a role where you are a supervisor of sorts. How would you tell someone, maybe find 3 different ways to actually to come on time? And I want you to think a little bit about the different roles that you play in those 3 different opportunities to discuss this issue with your with a coworker. Or so, you know, instead, I guess what we might do, too bad, because I really like the idea of a breakout, but maybe what we can do instead then is just move straight into maybe a discussion about how do we communicate something like that. So if you've got somebody that's late, what's a way that, and maybe not necessarily effective, that's not the question right now. It's like, what are some things that people typically do? Say, you know, say somebody, you know, John is late to work, and you walk in to somebody, and how would you manage that situation?
I would just sit them down and have a conversation about what is causing them to be late. If it's kids or family, then that's a different situation.
Absolutely.
And my personal philosophy involved more about getting the job done. So I'm assuming this person has to be there at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. Otherwise, I would say we can adjust your time around, you know, what works.
And so that, and go ahead, anybody, and go ahead and jump on in.
Explain to them why, in their particular role, being on time is important. That, you know, they may think that they're just their role doesn't really matter that much, and therefore if they're late, it doesn't matter. But if you can stress to them how important they are and how important their role is, and that may make them feel, understand better why they need to be on time.
Yeah, and I think along with that, I would express what's the impact on the other people on the team when they're not there to take care of things. So because a lot of times we just tend to see the impact on us, ourselves, but we have to expand their vision and help them see what the impact is on their coworkers as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great way of looking at it, because you're elevating somebody else's role in their own minds. Like, you are important, you do matter, and you're not just kind of maybe being judgmental or maybe punitive. Like, if you don't show up on time, you know, I'm going to have to start docking your pay, or you're embarrassing me. But that kind of a role that you took on in that scenario is really great, because you're a supportive person in that environment. So, you know, you choose to do that. You choose to take that road. That's really healthy. But there are times when people maybe need a little bit of a sterner approach. And I think that's, you know, we were talking about a little bit, Kevin, like sometimes people don't hear that though, do they?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they might need to have some sort of a stronger because, or an if, or a consequence, depending upon the mentality that you're working with there. And that's where I personally have trouble. You know, as a person, I don't like giving people ultimatums. I don't like showing people that particular avenue, but at times we do, and that's what I'm saying is I may be changing that up, really thinking about the person, not in a bad way, not making somebody feel awful, but maybe helping them understand that there are consequences to bringing that behavior to a work environment. And you're nodding, Evan, so you kind of understand what I'm after there.
I do, yeah. And you know, I think a lot of people have a tendency to jump right to the directive route, you know, and become very dictatorial about it. And you know, I believe there is a time and a place for that, but you have to know the person too. And you know, I think that comes with the understanding. If you know your team, you're going to know who can I be directive with, and more firm, and who do I need to be more questioning with, and gain a sense of understanding of what they're going through and what's creating this situation.
Very interesting, and that's exactly it. It's knowing, and it's that back and forth part. And I think if you know what you're good at, and then also know what you might want to try, you know, the different roles you play, you can start to vary them according to the appropriateness of the situation, rather than I'm always going to be like this guy right here. I'm always going to be the director. I'm always going to be pointing my finger. I'm always, you know, taking charge, or I'm going to be somebody that immediately starts making people uncomfortable with a confrontational statement. Maybe, you know, I'm going to learn to invite people into a conversation. I'm going to learn to help people, you know, maybe laugh a little, and you can try these different roles on, provided that you understand who you'll be talking with, you know, in that particular context, which we'll be getting to later. But it's really made a difference in terms of the way I think about myself. You know, I'm very cognizant now about what am I doing today? You know, how am I connecting with my students? And so I'm sure a lot of us have talked about conflict resolution in one way or another. And this isn't necessarily a role conversation about conflict resolution, but it's certainly one time when you can use these skills. You know, speaking face to face as much as we can is super important. Listening actively, like we've mentioned earlier, is something that that really does affect others, and without interrupting, being clear about the problem, and having somebody understand where they stand in a situation, where you stand, and then having definite expectations about what you want your outcome to be before you walk into a room really matters too. So right now what we're doing is we're talking about these really large and wide concepts, and we're going to get a little bit more narrow with how to use language around these. A because statement is a language situation. It really makes me, I really want you to be on time because you matter so much to the team. It's a because statement. That's a takeaway that any one of us could use anytime. I really, would you please take the dogs for a walk, because it really helps me get dinner done on time. If you're talking to your children, you know, if you would really do this, and then people understand where you're coming from. And that word because then becomes a kind of a pivotal moment for some people, because they don't know what you want or why you want it necessarily. Those are my dogs. Welcome to my life. They're supposed to be inside right now, but my children let them out. So respect the other person, like we were saying earlier, and, you know, try and smile if it's appropriate. Try and make somebody feel like they matter, even if you're gritting your teeth a little bit through the situation. And you know, and this is all about building connection. It's all about that authenticity. You know, being real with your expectations, and making somebody understand what you need. And obviously, at the very end, if you've got somebody that's troublesome and you need to rely on another person, or maybe another colleague that can express these ideas in a way that another person can understand more clearly, that could be something you can work on too, is maybe collaborate with someone in a very mindful and respectful way, of course. So energy is a big thing in an environment. We've all been to parties where we're having an amazing conversation with somebody, and then another person walks in the room and disrupts that bubble. You know, we're suddenly not in that environment anymore. We're in a conversation that maybe we're in a meeting, and suddenly this new person steps in. But what does this energy look like? And what actually is it in terms of a behavior pattern or the way somebody behaves? So when we sent emails, we've all sent all of these emails, I would imagine, at one point or another. We've been frustrated, we've been hopeful, we've tried to show affection, or we've tried to show some sort of support. You know, we've been concerned, but you know, these are all different kinds of moods and energies that we share. But if you don't know that you're doing it, a little bit like your role, you might create more problems than solutions. And there are ways to control your energy. There are three that I identified that I see happening a lot with people I work with: volume, pitch, and tempo. If you think about this in the way you use language, and kind of going back to your role and kind of mixing that up, you can see that there's kind of a formula that's starting to come together. You know, volume can be with the way you speak, in terms of being quiet, in terms of silence, the pitch in terms of being high or low, and then how quickly you deliver the information can really create an energy around you, and also create a reaction that's either a positive or a negative one based on the people you're working with. And I think that we all default to certain kinds of patterns. I have students or clients that talk very quickly, that have really long, complex sentences. Other people that talk in these very short sound bites that are maybe even like constricted or emotionally kind of guarded. You know, but if you think a little bit about playing with all three of these features, you might find that your cadence and your tone changes in a way that makes people more responsive to you. So I don't know, can everyone see the three examples here on my screen? So I thought for a moment we could take a look at the language, that we're going more from the, you know, the abstract idea of a role into something a little bit more concrete using language and expressions. So when you get a sentence like this, may I kindly ask if you had a chance to review the budget I previously sent, attached for your easy reference, you know, with that little question mark there. What's going on in that particular selection? Do you see any language behaviors that you can identify? If not, I can show them to you.
It seems a little passive aggressive.
Beautiful. Explain that.
Well, would you kindly, I mean, nobody talks like that. So if you say the word kindly, you're being aggressive. And then attached for your easy reference because you're too stupid to have seen it before.
Oh, wow. That's like the best reading of this I have ever heard. That's a lot of fun. And I didn't see it like that at all. Did anyone see it completely differently?
Well, I thought it was a little bit schmoozy, but you know, to Jackie's point that, yeah, I did send it to you before and you obviously didn't read it, so let's try again. So I think you walk kind of a fine line in there.
Yeah.
That is, and so there is that little bit. And for me, I think, I think it's because of some critiques I've gotten from the way I did presentations from my previous bosses and all that. I tend to be very deferential. So when I read this, I'm putting myself in this position. It's like, oh gosh, I didn't get an answer. The person's probably really busy. I'm trying to really like be nice so I don't make them mad. And so it's very interesting the way that, you know, you can read words. Clearly, though, we've got a question, we've got a long sentence, we've got this parenthetical, but I really do like the passive aggressive, like maybe overly saccharine. It's overly something for sure. And, you know, it's that kind of tone, it's that kind of, whether it's a little bit too schmarmy or if it's a little bit too quietly, I don't know, secretly kind of poking at someone. It is definitely over the top. But when we see these kinds of, when we see those kinds of moves, then we know that we're moving into something that's a little shaky for sure. It's a little bit long. So don't be late. Does anybody see volume in that?
Well, you know, I think to the point Kevin made earlier that it depends on the person that you're sending it to. Some people, absolutely, you can send that to and say, don't be late, and they'll go, okay. Other people would just be offended for having been that direct. So I think it depends on who's getting it.
Absolutely. And so that's always the case. And the capital, you know, the capitalization for don't, the exclamation mark, and it's also an imperative sentence. It's direct. And once again, if you have a great relationship with somebody and you tease and you joke and you punch around, yes. But if you send that to somebody that barely knows you, they might not know what to make of it. And it might be, and if you put a because statement there, it might help. Right? Don't be late because, you know, we all want to get to, you know, a happy hour on time. Well, that's cool. You can all be on time for that. But, you know, and so there's a little bit of that, but that is definitely an energetic volume thing where you can see exclamation marks and capital. The capitalization. Much work to be done still. We discussed not seeing it, still not seeing it. Your numbers are off and the back page is out of whack. Revise immediately. Can anybody add to, or what are you seeing going on in that particular scenario?
You know, that one's harsh no matter who you send it to.
It's Tarzan talk. You know, it may be even a little bit of texting going on. You know, it's short sentences, it's fragments. What does it say about the person? What does it say about the person writing it?
I had a former boss and every communication from her looked like that.
Someone who's not happy with what you're doing and get your act together and get going. We got a deadline and you're not helping.
So Peter, could something like this ever, and I'm just throwing it out there, ever be useful? Could a message like this have a positive effect?
I don't think so. I think you would want to state it in a different way. And you also may still want to know, what's going on? Why is this an issue? You know,
Exactly.
because usually you depend upon your team to be efficient, and this particular person obviously is not. Or is this person someone you want to get rid of anyhow because they're doing this?
Yeah, that was my thought, that I wouldn't send this the first time, but after the third or fourth time, this may be, the fifth one is, we got to talk about your future here.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
there's no specifics on any of those sentences. What would make my numbers be on? What revisions are you looking for? What does out of whack mean? I mean, those are, I don't know how to take corrective action from any of those.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I was going to say too, is there's a lot of ground covered here, but zero detail. So I wouldn't know how to interpret that.
But she is saying in this thing we discussed. So it's not as if this person is not aware of the issue.
Sorry, guys. We just got that kind of spotty. But going back to this conversation, it's, we've all gotten emails like this, I think, or we've all been around people that are doing this, and the goal is to maybe help people become a little bit more aware of it, especially when we're hurried, especially when we're frustrated, and it's what we're talking about respect earlier, I think, is letting people know, if I really care about my relationships, I'm not going to write something like this. And there have been days when we're pushed to the edge, and maybe those are the moments when we need to stop, take a breath, go take an intermission. Maybe that was, the great divine kind of sending us an idea there. Take a breath, walk around the block, go get a cup of coffee, whatever, then sit down and write this, and know that there's another person at the end of the receiving end, and that you are communicating a feeling that might be irrevocable damage. If this person is somebody that you care about, someone that you work for, or if you have colleagues that do this, it might be worth looking into and explaining to each other, ways that would help better communications take place in your environment. And so the next idea that around energy is your communication style, classic or romantic. And I think a combination of both is the best. I tend to veer towards the romantic, which is detailed, inspirational, creative. I tend to digress in my talking every once in a while. I'll have an idea and bounce back, and that's frustrating for some people. And you have to be really aware of that, particularly in a business environment. And yet, if you're too classic, if you're too clear, you're too economical, you're too proportioned, you're too factual, neutral, impersonal, or cold, once again, you're kind of veering too much to the other side. And so clear balance is in order. But if you think a little bit around the situations that you're writing in, sometimes you need to make a choice. And, it's just something to be aware of or be cognizant of when you're communicating with others, whether it's in a conversation or through an email or a Zoom. The audience really matters. Obviously, we've been talking about it, and if you can kind of see that it's come up time and time again in every single conversation that we've had, almost in one way or another. And one thing that's very important when you're speaking, and I know those of us that are coaches totally know what this is, and talking to other people is a nice mirroring when talking to other people really matters. And I'm seeing that my internet connection is unstable. Friends, are you hearing me okay?
We
We're
are,
hearing
but
you,
we
but
don't have the video or
I was
your
going to say,
screen.
you're not sharing your screen. You have to reshare
Okay.
your screen.
That's what happened. Okay. Thank you so much. That cut out and I had no idea. So let me see that. Yeah, just let me know. And once again, I would love to have had a breakout with this particular event. Let me see if I can see. Maybe there's just too large of a group for it. I'm not sure. But one thing that those of us that are coaches already understand what mirroring is. Does anybody want to give us a good definition of what mirroring looks like? No?
Isn't it just emulating the action of whoever you're talking to?
That's all it is. And
well, we're wired for this. We're wired
so?
for this because of mirror neurons. We're actually biologically wired to pick up on the signals that we're getting from other people. And this goes back to your concept about energy too. But when we're really engaged in a conversation with somebody, they may go like this, and then after a few moments, we may find ourselves doing that exact same thing, because our brain sends us a signal that says, if you take on that person's posture and their same energy, you will feel what they're feeling. And it's kind of an unconscious thing that happens without us even trying.
Absolutely. And when we, and I think to some degree or another, we can train ourselves to mirror a little bit. But you know what does come to mind, obviously, is it does sometimes feel a little bit manipulative. But you know, if you can lean forward when somebody is talking, or you know, or just be aware, or if you see somebody mirroring you, then you're at least understanding that these folks that are the conversations that you're having, there might be a little bit of communication taking place that's good. It's a little bit of a deeper connection. So the concept then is to just know that when you're speaking with someone and your physical body, like we were saying earlier, is doing something like what you're seeing the other person do, it's good. You're connecting. When someone mirrors another's actions, it activates the same areas of the brain, like you said, that process rewards and generates positive emotions immediately. Yes, there. So in a perfect environment, I would have invited us to try and make sure we're doing good on time. We're doing good on time. I'd like to see you guys think a little bit about a mirroring exercise on your own at one point or another. Once again, a breakout room would have been so cool. What I would love for you to have done is to talk to each other about an issue, perhaps maybe around COVID-19 in the work environment concern that you've got. And the idea would be for each one of you to speak a little bit around an issue. And the hard part, I think, for a lot of us is here. It's to listen, as we were saying earlier, and not interrupt. Don't offer advice, don't do anything, and just be there in terms of listening, and then speak back what that person said to you in your own words. And for those of us that have had counseling or therapy or, you know, relationship conversations or even good coaching, I think we've been taught to be able to do this a little bit. For those people that haven't had that kind of exposure, it's a really great thing to foster in a work environment. Perhaps maybe through your own example, you know, when someone comes to you with a problem, listen all the way through. Use silence, you know, maybe, you know, in terms of your energy, maybe thinking in terms of your volume, the way you speak back, the tone, say it back, and then let the person absorb that you've heard what they're saying. A lot of times they'll say, that's not what I meant. And that's very good, because even though you didn't hit the mark, what you are able to do is you're able to hear that you're misunderstanding something, and then you can move towards clarity. And it's a presence thing, it's a mindfulness thing, you know, that's a big word these days. If you can help create a culture where that kind of communication takes place, particularly maybe even in long distance, you might make some headway with some folks that haven't been feeling heard as much as they would like to be heard. And so here it is again, you know, body language, reflect unspoken values or spoken values, which is another important element. You're not just saying back the words, you're saying back what you think these persons' values are to them. You know, you're hitting a higher level conversation there. It isn't just the vocabulary words you're using, but you're thinking a little bit about what they value, what they think about, what they honor. And you can do this in writing as well. And here's a note. It's once again, it's just a made up letter actually about a woman who wants to collaborate with another woman in a candy making business. And she writes, "Dear Ms. Swanson, thanks for taking the time to discuss selling my handmade candies in your wonderful shop. As I mentioned in our conversation, I've been a customer of yours since I used my 3rd grade allowance to buy my first caramel apple kit from you. I'm honored that you'd consider selling one of my original creations at Yum alongside your own candies. We discussed a trial consignment arrangement in which a portion of the sales would go to the store. This is more than agreeable to me. Let me know how you want to proceed. I'm available, etc. I'll respond to your message ASAP. Thanks, Jennifer Wilson. So in this note, we see somebody who is really trying to ingratiate herself to a business owner. If she is hitting the mark, and that's assuming that she understands the woman with Swanson, what kinds of mirroring, what values or what ideas could you see this piece of writing mirroring about the woman that we're reading, that she's writing to? What do you think Ms. Swanson values based on this note?
She values things that are handmade.
Yes.
She values her customers.
And yeah, absolutely, keep going.
Also, I get a value around loyalty here.
Mhm.
I've been a customer of yours since I used my third grade allowance to buy my first caramel apple kit from you. It shows long-term loyalty too.
Yes, and attention to detail, in terms of the detailed letter that she's writing means that this person clearly wants to, in her mind, wants to hear the story. Somebody that appreciates that sort of an approach, as opposed to, hey, great, I'm glad, let's get together, really short, sweet. This is somebody who's wanting to connect about her past with this woman. And so, it's a personal connection that she's trying to create, and she sees that Ms. Swanson has that. Not everybody likes this kind of a letter. Some people want things a little bit more rapid fire, a little bit more practical. But in this case, she's maybe taking the risk to say something a little bit more personal. One moment. I'm on my call right now, Cassius, so can you go ahead and close the door, and I'll be almost done in just a little bit. Okay. That's a home interruption. I've just been
like 5 cats walk by, so.
Yeah, well, my son, I guess our Wi-Fi is out. I'm using my phone as a hotspot, so he's desperate for his Wi-Fi right now. So we're getting to our last piece here, which is language. Obviously, we've been talking about words and reflecting values and connecting with people through the way they feel about what we write and speak. But the last piece is just a really quick use of one particular word. And what word strikes you in this particular slide? I don't think I buy it. And there's no right answer, but I'm just curious if you guys see it.
The buy, I think, means I don't believe it.
That's right. There's definitely this idea of not buying into something. A word is used twice in this, and it's I.
Yes.
And I don't think I buy it. A lot of times I will work with people in writing saying getting rid of I think, I believe, etc. Because what it does is when you edit out the I, when appropriate, you're doing something very important for your writing. And this is something I learned that I thought was very interesting in my research about just very small tweaks that you can make to your writing. One of the most interesting results was part of a study my students and I, and this isn't me speaking, this is James Pennebaker, I conducted dealing with status and email correspondence. Basically, we discovered that in any interaction, the person with a higher status uses I words less, yes, less than people who are low in status. And I thought that was really interesting. And if you think about how much we put I in our emails and what that sounds like, it's interesting to me to see that might be actually kind of like going belly up in an email rather than sort of asserting maybe a sense of command or power in what you're saying. And at first I thought it was because you look narcissistic, but it actually suggests that you're not in control of the situation as much as you would think you were. So I thought we could play around a little bit with these I statements. Let's take a look at these for a moment. I really appreciate your detailed attention to this matter. How can you say that without using an I? If you're really buying into this idea that the I maybe makes you feel a little less powerful.
Your attention to this matter is greatly appreciated.
Right. And so, and that's a passive voice sentence, but it does remove the I. You did a great job. Your attention to this was wonderful. Just make a statement out of it. And if you, when you do that, it's the I here, I think, is what's interesting about the I, if I can get there again. What's interesting about the I here is it's saying that I believe it's true, but it's not a categorical fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're telling your audience, well, I think so, but maybe it's not true. When you make it a fact, it gives it a wider range of I think, importance and truth in some ways. So I'm so excited about the fundraiser. How could we rewrite that one?
Your fundraiser sounds so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe I can recover from this setback. We can recover from this. Mm-hmm. You can even say we, or this is something that, you know, we can, this is something that can be where, you know, we can fix this, or this is not, you can even change the whole sentence entirely. This is not a permanent situation. And then you can get yourself out of it, because you're taking a lot of blame here. And sometimes we've got to take the blame. Sometimes this is, you know, I don't want to say that we don't want to own things, but there's a way to make it maybe a little less painful, or maybe make it a little bit more neutral to put out a fire right around you at the time. I'm hoping you can send me a copy of the report soon. Please send the copy as soon as possible. And if you look at a lot of your emails, you'll probably see a lot of I's. And it's funny, when I read this, I really started practicing it. And if anything, it made me vary my sentence structure a whole lot. It changed the way I wrote in ways, and I'll still edit my I's out all the time. And I find that my emails do sound a little bit more confident than they did in the past, particularly when you're nervous about a client or something like that. So we're at the end of our chat. I'm hoping you enjoyed this. I really love visiting with you guys, and here's some things that I hope you can take away from the situation that you're in right now with being COVID, and maybe improving where you are as a communicator. Think about the roles that are the most important for you. You know, which ones, maybe try on a new role, like we mentioned earlier. Try doing something a little bit differently. Think about the aura, you know, to use that term, or the energy you bring into a conversation. How loud are you? How quickly are you speaking? How much silence can you use when you begin a meeting, for instance, which is something we didn't talk about, but it's a powerful tool. When you speak, think a little bit about speaking back to someone, the ideas that you've heard. Make sure you're listening, make sure you're present, and then adjusting that language to build some respect and connection with your colleagues and with your staff members. So I'll stop my screen share.
Good stuff, Christina. Thank you.
Oh gosh, thank you guys. And so do we have any questions or any comments that you guys would like to throw out there? Anything you'd like to ask or talk about?
This was really interesting. Thank you, Christina. Can you talk about using silence?
Yeah.
I know you have a couple minutes, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can stay longer. I don't have anywhere to be today, thankfully. But I have, silence is a really important skill, in that sometimes if you see a really great speaker come out on stage, and we're all learning these things, I think, as we go, but stepping out in front of somebody and you just wait for a moment and just look at your audience, a couple of beats before you start talking is a really great way to just kind of ground yourself, and people then listen. It's interesting, if you run out speaking right away, it changes the tone, and you also take power in silence. Also, as an educator, one thing I've really noticed, and I tried doing it here a little bit, but it's hard because I physically can't see you all. It's really interesting, but to ask a question and to let it rest, and don't worry about, don't make people feel that you're in a hurry for a response. I think that that's really important, to let people know you'd rather have a quality response than a quick response. That's an important thing too. Also, white space in writing is like silence. So, you know, adding a bit of white space between your copy on a website or whatever, it lets people breathe. I've also started taking, I could have done it today actually, it's like have a mindful moment before we begin, let everybody get settled, which is a little bit like a presentation, but it's letting them get settled. It's asking them to orient themselves. I see 2 chats too. Let's see if there's anything. Oh, yeah, I just got a couple of responses. Did that help you a little bit?
It did. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? I'll just kind of get my view up here. There we are. Oh, now I can see everybody. There's a Drew, David. Sorry, I didn't see you all. It's just so unfortunate with my slides up. I can't see you guys.
Well, Christina, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you got something out of it. There are tons of great writing books and tons of communication books. If anybody wants to write to me, I can recommend some great resources. And if you ever have any questions with your own businesses or work, or you know somebody that could use a little bit of communication help, let me know. You know, I'd be happy to step in and help in any way I can.